Welcome to Homeschool Expert. I'm excited you're joining me today to talk about our much anticipated lesson on finding the best curriculum. Many parents are so eager to talk about curriculum that they want to start here first. But as we discussed in the overview, it is easier to figure out what curriculum is best for your child if you first outlined your daily schedule needs, your child's learning preferences, and how you plan to join a homeschool community support group. Hopefully you have already seen lessons 1 through 3, so you're on your way to a solid homeschool foundation before starting this lesson. Based on what you know about your child's learning preferences, we will talk about how to find, test, and select the best curriculum to suit him. Keeping in mind your family's goals and needs, we will also talk about how to select curriculum that matches the amount of time you're able to spend on each subject as parent-teacher. Finally, we'll talk about where to access curriculum affordably and how to get the most out of that investment. That's a lot of good content to cover, so let's get started. Sometimes thinking about selecting the right curriculum can feel like climbing a mountain, but today when we get to the top, it's going to feel like a short hike up the hill in your hometown. Before we get any farther, let me dispel the greatest myth that exists about curriculum, the unicorn myth. Too often, parents doubt their curriculum choice, feeling like if only they could switch to a different math program, math would be easier. Sometimes that inkling is correct and a switch is the right decision. We'll talk about that halfway through. But for now, assume that there are both mediocre and marvelous curriculum choices out there, and that how your child responds to it is less about how much you paid for it and more about how you are adapting that curriculum to meet your child's learning needs. Let's start with how to select the best curriculum. Prior to today's lesson, we discussed how to identify, support, and teach to your child's learning preferences. That content comes back into play here as we consider how to select the best curriculum to meet your child's needs. Use that information when evaluating curriculum to identify how adaptable it is to various learning preferences. If your child is a kinesthetic learner, consider incorporating math manipulatives into your curriculum or purchasing a math curriculum that offers a more hands-on approach. Manipulatives, by the way, is just a teacher term for something your child uses to learn, like beans or blocks. Most curriculums will work for visual learners, and auditory learners can often easily adapt curriculum to their needs by reading instructions aloud or accessing some of the literature through an audiobook instead of a written page. Remember, having a learning preference does not mean that your child can only use that preference mode. It just means that that mode will often make the content more accessible. Secondly, consider the categories of content, method, and delivery, and which will be the best fit for your family. Content seems straightforward. If you want your daughter to learn math, you're going to buy a math book. Yes, but just because she was in 7th grade last year does not mean she needs an 8th grade math book this year, especially if you're switching curriculum. There's often variation between curricula and which subject material they cover in each grade, so check the table of contents and look for the grade that covers all the curriculum your child learned last year so that you can purchase the next level for the coming year. If you're unsure what your student learned prior to homeschooling, invite him into the conversation so that you can look at the different grade levels together and find the best fit. Method is about your approach to learning together. Do you think you will prefer an intensive role or more of a coaching role that supports her as an autonomous learner? There is also time to consider. If you're working full-time while educating your child, you might want to start out with a curriculum that doesn't require you to instruct directly, such as a program or an online course. After homeschooling for a couple years, some families discover the joy of building their own subject units to study together. Others prefer to stick with textbooks for simplicity and sake of time. Both can be great. When thinking about how much time you want to spend on curriculum, also factor in your travel schedule, if your child has unique learning needs that may require some initial adaptations, or if you have an unusual work schedule. This way, you can estimate how much time you have to teach and find the best curriculum that will fit your lifestyle. Similar to this is delivery, which is how you prefer to access your content. Some families choose to take courses online, either as an individual program, where a student can progress at her own speed, or as a member of an online classroom. For parent-teachers looking to outsource the grading of the work through an online class or a self-graded computer program, this can also be a good option. Both reassign the instruction to a different teacher, which may be important for parents who are working full-time or may not be capable of teaching that subject. Some families select video courses so they can watch the content together, giving the parents some quick review as well as instructional helps for the student and keeping parent and child on the same page. Other families have concerns about screen time and prefer the more traditional delivery style of textbooks, which may or may not be built with independent learning in mind, depending on the company you choose. Another approach to delivery is the one-room schoolhouse model, where all siblings are taught the same content together, modifying assignments for whomever's at the table. Sometimes the one-room schoolhouse model can be great for families with multiple siblings clustered somewhat close in age. I have been able to do this in the past with children spanning 4 grade levels. Whatever delivery method fits your situation best is up to you. Remember, homeschooling will not look like traditional schooling, so be willing to think outside of the box when considering the delivery of your curriculum. Try to have a general idea of your preferences before heading into your curriculum search to help de-stress the process. Not that you can't change your mind later, but it's a good place to start. When shopping for curriculum, begin with your core subjects. First searching for math, reading, and writing, since those are the 3 subjects that will be most central to your learning experience. Once you have located those, expand to science and history. To the extent it's possible, I encourage you to wait to purchase your 5 core subjects until you have identified all 5 first, since some curriculum companies combine subjects, and you may discover later that there are materials with a more dovetailed approach. If this is your first year homeschooling, I recommend waiting to invest in any other content areas until you have tried out your 5 core subjects for a few months to make sure you don't need to make adjustments there. As you consider different types of curriculum, notice that some require more time each week than others, and that may be what you want. Or you might need to overinvest time in one subject and pull back a little in others while you transition into homeschooling to get your student up to speed in a certain subject area. In balancing timing, also be sure to save time for life outdoors, as we discussed in Lesson 3. There's an inherent value to incorporating play in our curriculum so that our children have the opportunity to invent, create, and collaborate with friends. The goal is not to cram as much content into their day as possible now that we can feed them concentrated doses at home. We need to be just as intentional about creating spaces in the week for our students to explore their city, build forts with friends, visit museums with a buddy, or rescue a baby bird. As you consider which curriculum is the best fit for you, please use this curriculum search resource, which gives 10 principles of questioning to train you in what to look for and how to more easily locate a curriculum that meets your family's needs. I realize these questions are nearly impossible to see on the screen, so please check homeschoolexpert.com where it's available as a resource. In addition, look for more detailed handouts from today's conversation. As you look at various curriculum companies, I encourage you to ask whether or not you are allowed to reproduce pages for your children. Some companies have built their curriculum with family flexibility in mind. Others will not allow it. I realize it's tempting to photocopy an entire workbook to use with all our children under the classroom privilege exemption, but that's not how the exemption works. Classroom privilege often applies to schools who have already paid extra for the privilege of photocopying for additional students. So if the ability to photocopy ethically is important to you, look for that as a feature in the materials. Lastly, when deciding how to select the best curriculum, keep siblings in mind if you're a household with more than one child. Some of the curriculum I have purchased over the years has been more expensive initially, but since it's non-consumable, I have been able to use it with all 4 children and adapt it to their learning needs as we go, making it more affordable over time. Next on our short hike is how to find the best curriculum. This is where your homeschool network can come into play. If I'm seeking out a rigorous math curriculum for middle school, the first place I might turn is to my online homeschool community. I will either contact parents whose teaching practices I respect or toss out the question to all of the people on the list to get a sense of what is out there. After listening to advice and looking online, if the publisher does not have a substantial number of sample pages, I will reach back out to those parents and ask if they would be willing to either lend me their book or send me copies of the pages so that I can compare them. From there, I will look at various options with my student to see what he finds engaging or is explained in a way that makes sense to him. Researching online reviews, of course, is also an option. Prior to the internet, one of the original methods for locating textbooks was a curriculum fair. Many are still offered across the United States now, though honestly it's not the first place I send new homeschooling parents, simply because it can be very overwhelming. The best way to make use of a curriculum fair as someone new to educating at home is to visit the website simply for the vendor list, to use that as a starting point in your curriculum search. If you decide to attend a curriculum fair so you can hold material in hand before you make that final decision, I encourage you to enter the building with a short list of what you are considering to help focus your search. Some companies also offer discounts if you purchase curriculum during the fair. That said, don't feel like you need to attend a curriculum fair to pick your school materials, especially if you prefer to search online. Whatever your medium, pay special attention to the table of contents for each textbook before selecting a grade level, specifically for math. Again, if your student is older, involve him here for clarification. Some math providers also offer free placement tests online, and that's a great way to decide on the appropriate level for your student. If your student is caught in between two grades, consider starting with the easier grade and then accelerate your student as fast as needed. This ensures you don't have any gaps in your child's curriculum foundation and makes learning a more positive experience to start with. For parents enrolled in public homeschooling through their charter system, you can start with these first two steps and then can also reach out to the teacher of record at your charter for additional curriculum suggestions. For those parents schooling at home through an online academy or a private online school, depending on the school, there may be adaptations or curriculum options available, so it's worth asking. Now that you have hypothetically purchased your curriculum, it's time to test it. Recognize that in the first few months, there may be an adjustment period to changing to a new curriculum. Terms, instructions, and layouts may possibly look different from what you used before. And if you're beginning homeschooling for the first time, your child will also be adapting to your new role as parent-teacher. All that to say, lower your expectations just a little in the beginning to give everyone time to adapt. Once the adjustment phase is passed, begin to observe how your child interfaces with the curriculum. Is she engaged in the material? Regularly confused? Able to find answers on her own, or completely lost without your help? Some of this I realize is age dependent, but by third grade, depending on your curriculum, it's reasonable to expect that your student might be able to answer some initial questions on her own. If you see disconnects in the curriculum not meeting your students' needs, don't rush out to buy new curriculum right away. Instead, look to see if there's a creative way to adapt the material you already have to your child's learning preferences. I give a full chapter of creative ways to apply and learn new material based on learning preferences in my book, Study Smart, Study Less. Ultimately, remember that you are in charge, especially if you are homeschooling privately. If your child has mastered a concept after the 12th problem and there are 20 more, there is no need to kill past the normal drilling. Curriculum companies are often generous in providing more problem sets than are needed, so that teachers addressing students in a variety of environments have a way to assign more or less. Please understand, review is a valuable tool to maintain mastery, so I'm not suggesting you skip it all entirely, but aim to find the balance. You're in charge. Which leads nicely into the next topic of when to change curriculum. Remember, there's no magic unicorn when it comes to curriculum, but there are certainly reasons when a curriculum switch is in order. First, consider the possibility that the curriculum is the wrong pace for your student, either not rigorous enough to maintain his attention or so fast-paced it's difficult for him to keep up. That is a great reason to change. Secondly, it's a good reason to change if your student has not mastered the content before running out of material. Let's say, as a result of reasons beyond control, the parent-teacher is not able to adequately help the student master multiplication before running out of problems. And this becomes clear to the parent-teacher when division is introduced and the student is absolutely lost. The parent faces a difficult decision. Should I buy an exact replica of this textbook and have my student do all the same work over again? Or should I buy a new brand of math? Should I make up my own curriculum? Should I just keep moving through division and hope he eventually figures out multiplication? The answer to that last question is a definite no. Please do not push your student into the next unit if he has not yet mastered the former. But how to go back and master the former is more flexible. I have known parents in this scenario who purchase a secondary math book from a new company in the hopes that with a different approach or different explanations, the concept might become more accessible. Then, once multiplication is mastered, the student can choose between one book or the other to finish that year. Other parents, particularly skilled in the subject, might want to take it upon themselves to just rewrite the curriculum for that section. Lastly, there are great online supplements and apps that could be sufficient to fill the gap. However it's accomplished, this is another scenario where a curriculum change may make sense. As we talk about scenarios for switching curriculum, I have a strong caution that has been handed down to me from previous generations of expert homeschool parents, and I value this very highly. Do not change curriculums more than 3 times in a single subject in your student's career. That advice is held true for me, especially for core subjects like science, math, and history. The order in which material is presented can vary pretty significantly between one company and the next, and switching curriculums often leads to gaps in your child's knowledge base, so switch cautiously. Now for the fun topic of bundles. Bundles are very attractive, especially for families new to homeschooling. Parents are often drawn to the idea of getting everything in a box with pre-made lesson plans and educator videos. For many families, this has been a successful way to ensure that there are no gaps, and can also be an especially good fit for parents who don't feel capable of fully addressing all the content on their own. If a bundled curriculum is what works best for you, go for it. Just know in advance that even though it sounds like less work, it still requires that the parent-teacher sort through the material, find ways to adapt it to their child's learning needs, and pare things back as needed. For other families, bundling is not a good fit. To start, curriculum bundles can be very expensive. From there, the challenge with buying a bundle is that you may end up losing some of the autonomy of homeschooling because you may feel locked into someone else's lesson plans. And by the end of the year, some families find that there are books left over that they paid for and never used because they ended up customizing the curriculum to their child anyway. A creative way I've seen families merge these two is to purchase lesson plans from a company rather than the full bundle. Some curriculum companies will create a dovetailed lesson plan using outside resources that merge history with literature and geography, assigning writing tasks that cover all three. This sort of bundling has been successful for many families in that it enables them to adapt a lesson plan across multiple age ranges, reading one book to 3 children in 3 different grades and requiring an age-appropriate follow-up assignment from each. Some of these dovetailed companies will give the option of buying the lesson plans with the bundled curriculum or purchasing the lesson plans separately. At that point, parents select books from the list to purchase on their own or get from the library, making it more affordable. Your comfortability with the core subject and availability of time will determine whether or not you want to purchase keys or lesson plans. For example, with math, it's pretty straightforward for me to count how many lessons are in the book and map them out according to the calendar. The math key, on the other hand, is a huge time saver, helping me grade quickly. Conversely, there may be a subject like science, where the teacher planner is hugely helpful because it provides me with a lot of background information to cover questions my student might ask that I don't have an answer for. However, I may not feel like the answer key is necessary. These are just hypotheticals. My aim here is to free you up to purchase less, to realize there's some places where less is more and you really don't have to have one of everything. Finally, the last stop on our journey is cheap solves. The first is what I call the twofer. One way to save money homeschooling if you have multiple children is to look for curriculum that enables you to bridge multiple grades with a single book list and adapt assignments, as I've mentioned a moment ago. There are many years I've been able to cover 2 or even 3 students with the same curriculum across 4 grade levels. This has been a real bonus when we're overlapping history with literature and geography so that we're getting a holistic view of time and people in a way that's memorable and together. Buying used curriculum, either online or through your homeschool co-op, is another great way to get excellent materials for less than the sticker price. Used curriculum tends to be cheapest in the spring and most expensive in the fall. Thirdly, look for ways to buy school supplies in bulk. For example, it's much cheaper in the long run to buy 1,000 loose sheets of paper through an online distributor than it is to buy a 50-page spiral notebook at the grocery. And with multiple kids, that adds up. Sometimes it takes spending money to save money, and for us that has been ebooks. Purchasing e-readers as part of your student's curriculum will likely open up a large selection of titles from your local library with no more worries about overdue fines. It also creates an opportunity to purchase mega packs of classic literature online for pennies per book. Some parents are rightly concerned about the negative effects of screen time to melatonin and serotonin levels. I encourage you to shop carefully for e-readers that are not backlit but have lighting around the front of the frame to minimize those concerns about the effects of blue light screens. Scientists are still studying the effects of screens on neurology, but this seems to be a good starting place. Lastly, look for ways to get creative with friends. Consider renting from, borrowing, or sharing the cost of non-consumables with another family in your co-op. If you co-purchase it together, you can co-sell it together when you both are done. It's common practice on homeschool chats to see parents asking to borrow a resource or a teacher key for a short period of time, and most often families are eager to help. These are all great ways to find the curriculum that best meets your needs and will be life-giving for your homeschool journey. Hopefully you're walking away from today's lesson feeling equipped to select the best curriculum for your child, as well as relieved to discover it's more about adapting the curriculum you purchase than searching for a unicorn. The amount of curriculum resources available today are incredible, especially when you consider that many great thinkers over the last few hundred years became well educated with far less. Utilizing your homeschool community is a great way to narrow your curriculum search quickly or consider new resources. Even with the most excellent curriculum in hand, it's critical that we keep its ability to impact in perspective. Ultimately, the key to developing bright students in our children is not curriculum. It is to foster a love for learning from a young age, encourage curiosity, develop integrity and compassion for others, and to show them they are loved. With that foundation in place, your curriculum will strengthen the wonderful adult your child is already becoming. Remember, you can do this, and we are here to help. Please check out the book Homeschool Like an Expert for more resources. Thanks for joining me today, and see you next time.